The salt sting of the sea was a ghost on his skin, a persistent memory that the lavender-scented air of a London drawing room could not quite erase. Captain Samuel Thorne stood at the window of his newly acquired townhouse on the fringes of Mayfair, a man out of place in his own life. The house was a statement, all gleaming mahogany and tasteful, expensive wallpaper, purchased with the heavy, clinking coins he had wrested from the treacherous embrace of the Indies. It was meant to be an anchor, this house, a solid declaration that he was no longer the son of a Bristol dockhand, but a gentleman of means. Yet, as he watched the carriages roll by, their polished wheels glinting in the pallid English sun, he felt the familiar roll of a deck beneath his feet. The silence of the house was deafening. He missed the cacophony of the Seahawk, the groan of timbers, the snap of canvas, the bawdy shanties of his crew. Here, the only sounds were the solemn tick of a long case clock and the distant, polite murmur of a city that viewed him with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. His man of business, a perpetually flustered individual named Pips, had been clear. The fortune is substantial, Captain, quite substantial. But money alone does not make a man. You must integrate. A wife, sir. A genteel wife from a good family. That will be the final seal on your position. And so, Samuel had embarked upon the most terrifying campaign of his life, the London season. It was a battlefield of ballrooms and drawing rooms, fraught with perils more subtle than a hurricane and adversaries more sharp-eyed than any Barbary corsair. The ladies were exquisite, polished like pearls, their laughter a tinkling bell, their conversation a rehearsed minuet of weather, fashion, and approved literature. He had danced with a dozen of them, their gloved hands light as sparrows in his own callous one, their eyes assessing the cut of his coat, the weight of the silver buckles on his shoes. He found them bland. Like eating ship's biscuit day after day, they simpered at his stories of monsoons and spice markets, their eyes glazing over until he returned to the safer ground of complimenting their gowns. He was playing a part, and he felt the strain in his jaw, in the forced smile that never quite reached his eyes. His gaze drifted from the street to the house next door. It was a slightly shabbier version of his own, the paint on the window frames peeling, the small front garden a touch overgrown. It belonged, Pips had informed him, to a widowed Mrs. Croft and her spinster daughter. No fortune to speak of, I'm afraid, Pips had sniffed. The daughter is said to be bookish. As if summoned by his thoughts, a figure emerged from the side of the neighboring house. It was not the mother, but the daughter, Miss Eleanor Croft. He had seen her only in passing, a swift, dark-clad movement. Today she stopped in the garden, a book in one hand, her head tilted back to observe a stubborn rosebush fighting its way up the wall. She was nothing like the confections of the ballrooms. Her gown was a serviceable gray wool, devoid of frills, and her chestnut hair was bundled into a simple, slightly messy knot from which rebellious curls were already escaping. There was no artifice about her, no calculated posture. She was simply present. Driven by a curiosity he couldn't name, Samuel left his sterile drawing room and stepped out into his own small, meticulously manicured garden. The iron gate between the two properties squealed in protest as he opened it. Miss Croft turned. Her eyes were not the docile blue of the society misses. They were a clear, intelligent gray, the color of the sea before a storm. They held no simper, no calculated welcome. Instead, they assessed him with a frankness that was both unsettling and refreshing. "Captain Thorne," she said. Her voice was low, melodic, but with a core of steel. "I see you are investigating your domain. I trust the boarders meet with your approval." Samuel felt a smile tug at his lips, the first genuine one in weeks. "Merely being neighborly, Miss Croft. The boarders are adequately defined by this fearsome gate." She did not smile back, but a glint of humor appeared in those stormy eyes. "It has seen better centuries. Like most things in our household. I was just admiring your gardener's handiwork. It is very symmetrical." "You sound as if you find that a fault." "Not a fault precisely," she said, turning her gaze back to her own wilder garden. "Simply a choice. Order over chaos. Control over nature. It is a very masculine approach to horticulture, I find. My mother's lavender, however, is threatening a coup d'etat on your side. I should warn you, it is tenacious. Samuel looked at the line of purple flowers indeed spilling through the ironwork. I shall consider myself warned. And what is your approach to horticulture, Miss Croft? Chaos, she said simply, a faint smile finally gracing her lips. It transformed her face, lighting it with a sharp, compelling beauty. I prefer to see what chooses to grow, rather than dictate what should. He gestured to the book in her hand. And is that your philosophy of literature as well? She glanced down at the volume as if she had forgotten it. Virgil. In the original Latin. Hardly a chaotic choice. It is for the solace of structure, Captain. The world may be unruly, but the Aeneid has a defined beginning, middle, and end. Unlike, say, the London season. Her gaze was pointed. He barked a short laugh, the sound startlingly loud in the quiet street. You have me there, Miss Croft. I find its narrative convoluted. And its characters woefully underdeveloped, she added dryly. But I am keeping you from your symmetries. Good day, Captain. She gave a brief, unceremonious nod and turned, walking back into her house with a stride that was neither a glide nor a shuffle, but a purposeful walk. Samuel stood for a long moment, staring at the empty space where she had been. The air, which had moments before smelled only of damp earth and his own expensive, imported flowers, now carried the faint, wild scent of lavender and something else, something sharp and clean, like ink and intellect. For the first time since he had landed on English soil, Samuel Thorne felt the thrill of discovering something truly interesting. The following week, Samuel attended a soirée at the home of Lady Dinsbury, a formidable matron with a reputation for launching the most successful débutantes. The air was thick with the scent of perfume and the low hum of curated conversation. Samuel, in a coat that felt too tight across the shoulders, was performing his duty, circling the room under Pips's anxious eye. He was speaking with Lady Arabella Stanton, the current diamond of the season. Her hair was the color of spun gold, her eyes a wide, innocent blue, and her laugh a perfectly modulated ripple that drew admiring glances from all around. And Papa says the country air in Sussex is so very superior, she was saying, fluttering her fan. But I declare, London has its charms. Do you not agree, Captain? Indeed, Samuel said, his mind conjuring an image of a wild garden and a sharp-tongued woman quoting Latin. The variety is remarkable. At that moment, a commotion at the door drew his attention. Lady Dinsbury's voice, sharp with displeasure, cut through the murmur. Miss Croft, I had not thought to see you here. Is your mother well? Samuel turned to see Eleanor Croft standing in the doorway, looking like a sparrow that had flown into an aviary of birds of paradise. She wore a dress that was clearly several seasons out of fashion, but she held herself with an unassailable dignity that made the frills and furbelows around her seem frivolous. Perfectly well, thank you, Lady Dinsbury, Eleanor replied, her voice carrying clearly. She sent her regrets. A headache. She insisted I come in her stead. It was a polite fiction, and everyone in the vicinity knew it. Mrs. Croft was likely perfectly healthy, but their precarious finances made social appearances a calculated risk. Eleanor had been sent as a scout, to be seen and to maintain a tenuous foothold in a world that was rapidly closing its doors to them. Samuel watched, fascinated, as Eleanor navigated the room. She did not seek the center. She moved to the periphery, finding a chair near a bookshelf. She was not ignored. Her family name, though impoverished, was old and respected. But the conversations that included her were brief, polite, and swiftly terminated. Driven by an impulse he didn't care to examine, Samuel excused himself from a pouting Lady Arabella, and made his way across the room. Miss Croft, he said, bowing slightly. A surprise to see you here. She looked up from a volume she had plucked from the shelf, A History of the Peloponnesian War. Captain Thorne, the surprise is mutual. I had you pegged for a more strenuous form of social climbing. This seems a rather mild incline. He laughed, earning a startled look from a nearby dowager. You see straight through a man, don't you? It is not a difficult feat when most men are so transparently varnished, she said, but her tone was not unkind, merely observational. You are hunting for a wife. It is the logical next step in your campaign. And you? He asked, leaning against the bookshelf, effectively blocking her from the rest of the room. What is your objective for the evening? Survival, she said bluntly, closing the book. And to secure a few lemon cakes for my mother. She is fond of them, and Cook has been economizing. Her frankness was like a splash of cold, clean water. There was no pretense, no dissembling. In a room full of people playing intricate games, she was a checkers piece among chessmen, direct, uncomplicated, and powerful in her simplicity. You are not like the other ladies here, he said, the words out before he could stop them. No, I am not, she agreed, meeting his gaze squarely. I lack the fortune, the fashion, and the requisite fascination with waistcoats and weather. I am a bluestocking captain, a spinster, a drain on my mother's limited resources and a disappointment to the memory of my father, who at least hoped I would make a respectable, if not brilliant, match. You say it as if it is a life sentence. Is it not? She arched a brow. My only value in this room is as a cautionary tale or, on a good day, a conversational novelty. But I have my books, my garden, and my mind. It is more than many women in my position have. A young fop, emboldened by claret, wandered over. I say, Thorne, monopolizing the best conversationalist? Not sporting. He leered at Eleanor. Miss Croft was just explaining some frightfully dull Roman battle to me. Quite sucked the fun out of the room. Samuel felt a surge of protective anger, hot and sudden. But before he could speak, Eleanor did. Then I shall absolve you of the burden of my company, Mr. Farnsworth, she said, her voice sweet as poison. I would not wish to be responsible for the deflation of your merriment. Perhaps you should seek out Lady Arabella. I believe she was discussing the profound philosophical implications of a new shade of ribbon. Mr. Farnsworth blinked, too slow to grasp the insult fully, and shuffled away. Samuel stared at her, a slow grin spreading across his face. You are dangerous. Only to fools, Captain, she said, standing. And now, I believe my mission for lemon cakes awaits. If you will excuse me. He watched her go, a gray figure moving through the pastel crowd, and felt a strange, fierce pride on her behalf. That night, lying in his large, too-soft bed, it was not Arabella's golden curls he pictured, but a pair of clear, stormy gray eyes and the sharp, witty mouth that spoke truths no one else dared utter. Samuel began to orchestrate encounters. He took walks in the park at the hour he knew she fetched milk from the dairy. He accidentally encountered her at the lending library. He even, to the horror of his gardener, allowed the lavender to continue its invasion, telling the man to leave it be. Their conversations were his anchor in the swirling, meaningless social sea. They argued about philosophy, Hobbes versus Rousseau. They debated naval history versus land-based military strategy. She had a mind like a rapier, sharp, precise, and deadly effective. She challenged him, provoked him, made him think in ways he hadn't since he was a young man charting unknown coasts. One afternoon, he found her in her garden, attempting to tie up the rebellious rosebush with hands scratched and dirty. Allow me, he said, stepping through the gate. I may prefer symmetry, but I know my way around a knot. She surrendered the twine without argument. A sailor's skill finally finds a practical application in Mayfair. He worked deftly, his large, capable hands gentle on the thorny stems. You have a low opinion of practical applications in Mayfair. I have a low opinion of idleness disguised as industry. Embroidering a cushion is not industry. It is decorative procrastination. And what is this? He asked, gesturing to the rosebush. Necessity, she said simply. And love. This rose was planted by my grandmother. It has outlasted the family fortune. I feel a certain duty to ensure it outlasts me. He finished his knot and stepped back. There. It should weather the next storm. She looked at his work, then at him. You are not what I expected, Captain Thorne. What did you expect? A brute. A man made coarse by his trade, buying his way into a society he doesn't understand, with a wife as a trophy. A man who would see a woman like me as either an irrelevance or an irritant. And now I see a man who is conflicted. You have the wealth to buy anything you want, but you are discovering that the things you truly want are not for sale. Her perception was unnerving. It was as if she had peeled back the layers of his fine waistcoat and seen the restless, ambitious, lonely heart beneath. I want a place in this world, he confessed, the words feeling like a secret. A real place, not one purchased at auction. Then you must stop trying to purchase a wife, she said softly. A real place is built, Captain. Not bought. It is built on shared respect, on common ground, on affection. She looked away, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. I have overstepped. No, he said, his voice rough. You have not. In that moment, surrounded by the scent of old roses and lavender, Samuel Thorne knew with a terrifying, exhilarating certainty that he was falling in love with the one woman in all of London who could not advance his standing, who would, in fact, cement his status as an outsider. The penniless, sharp-tongued bluestocking next door held the key to his happiness, and the lock was his own ambition. The conflict came to a head at the Summerley Ball, the premier event of the season. Samuel had secured a dance with Lady Arabella, a strategic move advised by Pips and applauded by her father, the Earl of Marlow. He was on the cusp of everything he had worked for. A proposal to Arabella was expected, and her acceptance was a near certainty. The ballroom was a blaze of light and color. Samuel, in his dress uniform, cut a dashing figure. He danced with Arabella, who felt as light and insubstantial as thistledown in his arms. Her conversation was a predictable stream of compliments and trivialities. He found his eyes scanning the room, searching for a splash of gray, a familiar, intelligent face. He found her on the sidelines, of course. Eleanor was standing with her mother, a frail-looking woman who clung to her daughter's arm. She was wearing the same dress from the soirée, and the sight of it, so brave and so shabby, struck a chord deep within him. During a break in the dancing, he made his way to her. Miss Croft. Mrs. Croft. A pleasure. Mrs. Croft simpered nervously. Captain Thorne. The ball is magnificent, is it not? Indeed, Samuel said, but his eyes were on Eleanor. Are you enjoying the evening, Miss Croft? It is a spectacle of unparalleled grandeur, she said, her tone neutral. I feel rather like a student of anthropology, observing the mating rituals of a fascinating and exotic tribe. He smiled. And what have you concluded? That the males puff out their chests and display their plumage, while the females assess the quality of the feathers. It is all very logical, really. Lord Marley, a portly red-faced man with a voice like a foghorn, joined them. Thorne. There you are. Arabella is looking for you. Best not keep my girl waiting, eh? He clapped Samuel on the back, his eyes sliding over Eleanor and her mother as if they were furniture. Eleanor's posture, always so straight, became rigid. A mask of cool indifference settled over her features. Of course, my lord, Samuel said, the words tasting like ash. As he turned to go, he caught Eleanor's eye. There was no reproach there, only a deep, weary resignation. She had expected nothing less, and that, more than any insult, cut him to the quick. He returned to Arabella's side, his mind in turmoil. The music started up again, a waltz. He led her onto the floor, his movements automatic. He was so close to his goal. The Earl had all but given his blessing. Society was ready to anoint him. But as he spun Arabella around the room, he saw Eleanor, quietly leading her mother towards the exit. She was leaving, giving up, and the sight filled him with a panic more acute than any he had felt in the face of a raging storm. He was making a terrible, catastrophic mistake. He was about to trade a life of vibrant, challenging real companionship for a gilded cage. He was about to marry a woman he respected less than the lowliest powder monkey on his ship, all for a place in a society he was coming to despise. The music swelled. Arabella smiled up at him, a perfect, empty smile. And Samuel Thorne reached his breaking point. Forgive me, Lady Arabella, he said, his voice strained. I am unwell. I must take some air. He left her standing in the middle of the dance floor, a look of stunned confusion on her face. He didn't care. He pushed through the crowd, ignoring the startled whispers, his sole focus on the retreating figure of Eleanor Croft. He caught up with them on the grand staircase, his breath coming in short gasps. "Miss Croft. Eleanor." She turned, her eyes wide with surprise. "Captain? Is something wrong?" "Everything," he said, his voice low and intense. "Everything is wrong." He looked at Mrs. Croft. "Madam, I beg your pardon for my forwardness, but I must speak with your daughter. Alone. It is a matter of utmost importance." Mrs. Croft looked from the wild-eyed captain to her daughter's pale face and, with a surprising show of perception, nodded. "I will wait in the carriage." They stood on the staircase, the sounds of the ballroom muffled and distant. The glittering world he had sought was at his back, and the only thing that mattered was before him. "Have you lost your mind?" Eleanor whispered, her composure shattered. "You just abandoned Lady Arabella in the middle of a waltz. The scandal." "To hell with the scandal," he said, taking a step closer. "To hell with Lady Arabella and her father, and this entire bloody farce. You were right. I have been a fool. I have been trying to buy a life when the one I want has been right next door all along." Her lips parted in shock. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I do not want a genteel wife to secure my place in society. I want a partner, a challenger, a friend. I want you, Eleanor. You, with your sharp tongue and your sharper mind and your brave, stubborn heart. I love you." Tears welled in her gray eyes, but she did not let them fall. "Samuel, you cannot. Your fortune, your position, are worthless without you," he said fiercely, taking her hands in his. They were cold. He chafed them gently. "I have sailed the world, Eleanor. I have faced pirates and tempests and disease. I have amassed a fortune that could buy this house and everyone in it. But I have never been as terrified as I have been these last few weeks, trying to pretend I am something I am not. And I have never been as happy as I am when I am arguing with you over Virgil in your garden." A single tear traced a path down her cheek. "They will never accept us. They will call you a fool and me a fortune hunter." "Let them," he said, his voice softening. "We will be our own society, you and I. We can build our own place. A place with wild gardens and full bookshelves and conversations that last into the night. Say you will have me, Eleanor. Say you will marry me." He looked at her, his heart laid bare, all his plans and ambitions shattered and rebuilt in this single, desperate moment. He saw the war in her eyes, fear warring with hope, practicality warring with a longing she had long suppressed. Then slowly a true, radiant smile broke through her tears, a smile just for him. "It seems a terribly chaotic arrangement, Captain." He grinned, a wave of pure, unadulterated joy washing over him. "I am counting on it, Miss Croft." The scandal was, as predicted, magnificent. Captain Thorne, the rich eccentric, jilting the season's diamond for the penniless, bookish Miss Croft. It was the talk of London for weeks. The invitations dried up. The Earl of Marley publicly declared him a blackguard. Samuel found he didn't care in the slightest. Their wedding was a small, quiet affair in the local church, attended only by Mrs. Croft, a few of Eleanor's faithful friends, and a handful of Samuel's old, salt-weathered shipmates, who cheered with a volume that startled the vicar. They did not take a grand tour of Europe. Instead, Samuel bought a comfortable estate in Kent, with a large, rambling house and grounds that sloped down to the sea. Eleanor, for the first time in her life, had a library she could not fill and a garden she could not tame. One evening, a year after the ball that had changed their lives, Samuel stood on the terrace, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and violet. The scent of the sea mingled with the perfume of Eleanor's roses. She came to stand beside him, her hand finding his, her head resting on his shoulder. Her belly was gently rounded with their child. "A far cry from the Indies," she murmured. "A better fortune," he replied, kissing her hair. Inside, the house was not silent. It was filled with the sound of turning pages, of their laughter, of the distant crash of waves. A symphony of a life built not on purchase, but on choice. On love. He had sought a fortune and found it, not in heavy chests of silver, but in the sharp, loving heart of the woman beside him. And Captain Samuel Thorne knew, with a certainty that dwarfed any navigational chart, that he was finally truly home.